It's now time for me to introduce the first speakers. We have Anna Fallgren, Program Manager for Plan International Denmark's WASH project in Ethiopia. And we also have Lili Degife, Team Lead at Plan International Ethiopia. I think, Anna, you are connecting from Sweden, is that correct?
I'm actually connecting from Copenhagen.
You are connecting from Copenhagen, Denmark. And Lili, where are you connecting from?
From Ethiopia, Addis Ababa.
You are connecting from Addis Ababa.
Yeah.
And for all of our participants, it would be lovely to know where you are connecting from. So just type your country in the chat, and we are ready to speak more about the S and the H in WASH. Lili and Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Görrel. I will try to share my screen here, so maybe just say yes if you can see it. Yes, good. Thank you so much. That introduction, thank you very much. My name is Anna Fallgren, and I'm a WASH program manager for a Plan Barnefonden, which is maybe a complicated way of saying Plan Denmark. And today, me and my colleague Lili will talk about the S and H in WASH. But before I let Lili have the mic, I just want to mention a little bit about who we are. So Plan International is a child rights organization, and we work with children and girls at the heart of our interventions. And together we work towards the goal that you can see mentioned here, a world where we're all equal, created in collaboration with children and girls in over 80 countries. And some of the focus areas are the ones that you can see here. So water, sanitation and hygiene, which is what we will talk about today. Equal access to education, gender equality, protection from violence, climate resilience, youth empowerment, sexual reproductive health and rights, and early childhood development, and skills and work. And these are many aspects, but all of them are very important parts of children's lives. And Plan International works to ensure that these sort of prerequisites are in place so that children, and especially girls, are able to thrive and develop their full potential. And in this session, we will talk about Plan International's approach to WASH, and we will bring in some examples from our work in Ethiopia. And I'm delighted to hand over to my colleague Lili, who will talk more about WASH. So over to you, Lili.
Thank you very much, Anna. Hello, everyone in this workshop. So my name is Lili Degife. I work for Plan International Ethiopia as a WASH project lead for one of a WASH project named SunWASH, which is funded by Grundfos Foundation, which we will talk about it later today. So coming to the topic of discussion, what's WASH? As we all know, the term WASH refers to water, sanitation and hygiene. It's actually an integrated approach of providing water supply, improved sanitation and hygiene promotion services to target beneficiaries. So yeah, why should we focus on, why should we integrate these three elements is because they are very much interdependent. Meaning that access to water is really important to bring an improved sanitation and hygiene. And also improved sanitation and hygiene is crucial in ensuring good water quality and improved health. So in terms of looking at WASH and the SDG, we usually think of WASH is only part of the SDG goal. In fact, all the SDG goals are interrelated or interconnected. And WASH is one of the aspects that is important to achieving another SDG goals, including poverty and hunger eradication, promoting good health and well-being, bringing quality education, and promoting gender equality, and so forth. But when we see the figure in practice, Ethiopia, like many other developing countries, is far behind in meeting the sanitation and hygiene goals of the SDG goal. As you can see in the screen, according to the GMP 2022 report, only 25% of the rural households got water from an improved source, whereas those households who use unimproved latrines are about 70%, which is much higher than the water. And also 21% are still practicing open defecation. In terms of looking at the hygiene promotion, over 41 million households do not have a hand washing facility at all. Therefore, it's very important to focus on the S&H component of wash, as a simple hand washing with soap can reduce many of the diarrheal infections. It's about 40% of the diarrheal infection can be reduced by a simple hand washing. This is especially the case for Ethiopia, like many developing countries. In terms of looking at the return of investment, for every $1 invested for sanitation and hygiene, there is a return of $5 as compared to $2 for water. Another aspect is also to consider is also there is a greater risk for women and girls if sanitation and hygiene is not handled properly, which will expose them, for gender-based violence and any other health related problems. So, then why do the sanitation and hygiene component of WASH is ignored or not practiced as much as water? So over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Lili. Yes, so now we know that it's very important to focus on sanitation and hygiene when we work with water. But then why do we tend to forget about it? Well, I think that many of us can relate to that water is clean and appealing and perhaps nicer to talk about than poo or menstruation blood, which I think also S&H or the sanitation and hygiene is also associated with a lot of taboos. We don't like to talk about it. Even in the advertisement, we see that blood is often pictured as blue when you have these sanitary pad adverts. And I think that that's why this event today, we're so grateful to be here, because I think it's very important to realize that it's our duty as NGOs and also as journalists to communicate a fair picture of sanitation and hygiene, and to kind of acknowledge that that is something that we need to talk about, and not the least for all the girls out there in the world who believe that they're impure or unworthy just because they're on their periods, and that needs to stop. We also see that sanitation and hygiene is often part of national policies in countries, but there are few resources to handle it. And sanitation and hygiene is not either a priority among donors. According to the WHO, there was a survey or a study which said that the aid disbursements for sanitation were only half of that for drinking water between 2010 and 2018. So I think that says quite a lot about priorities as well. So it is an attitudinal problem. And plan in our work, we see this both at the structural authority level, but also at the local community level. So in order to change that sort of attitude and behavior on, for example, menstruation or open defecation, it requires quite a lot of personal efforts to change that. And that can be quite hard, of course. So Lili, how do we work with WASH then?
So yeah, how do we work with WASH? So as Plan International Ethiopia, one good example could be our SunWash project, which is implemented in western part of Ethiopia, in Gambela region. When we see the context, this region faces many problems, including climate change, causing flooding and drought to happen more frequently. Another aspect is this region is characterized by high refugee influx. As you can see in the map, this region is bordering with South Sudan, and a lot of refugees are entering to the region, causing social tension and conflict due to the competition of scarce resource such as water. And also another aspect to look at is also regarding harmful gender norms. According to our baseline assessment, women and girls are more disadvantaged by the lack of access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. This is due to the gender-based division of WASH tasks among women and women, as most of the women are assigned or designated in WASH related tasks, including water collection, storage, and maintaining the cleanness of the households, whereas men are the ones who make decisions in terms of locating where to locate water supply systems and latrines, and also they are very much involved in construction of those facilities. So this has limited women from participating in WASH-related decision making, which affects the most. In terms of looking at hygiene promotion, this region is also experiencing that as many, African countries, menstruation is considered as a shame or a guilt that don't need to be discussed openly. It is something considered as a private matter and not that needs to be sacred. So due to this, women are not also allowed to attend school. They are forced to stay at home during their menses. So this again limits their ability to participate in or to attend school and to participate in any development activities that affect them. Another aspect to look at is also sanitation management. As you can see, a lot of the communities or majority of the communities are not practicing, they are practicing an open defecation. It's a very significant number, as you can see. So yeah, that's why projects like SunWash is required to alleviate the problems. So given all these contexts, our SunWash project is designed in such a way that it can respond to a climate hazard such as flooding, and using a gender transformative approach to address the needs of WASH in the community, where we focus on tackling the root cause of gender inequality to reach to the most disadvantaged groups of the community, including girls, women, and children. So how do we do that? We engage different stakeholders, including duty bearers, communities such as women, men, people with disabilities, and minority groups to bring the required change. So regarding the details of the project, including the goals, the outcomes, and the activities, my colleague Anna will explain it to you. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Lili. So given this context then that Lili has just described with those numbers and figures, Plan Denmark and Plan Ethiopia developed the SunWash project in partnership with Water Mission. And I know that they will probably be, I think they will be talking after this session, so I will not talk too much about who they are. But basically, they're bringing a lot of capacity and training and expertise to this intervention, and we're really grateful for that. And I also want to mention that the project is funded by Grundfos, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. And the project is now in its second phase. The first phase started back in 2020, run for 3 years, and then the second phase has been running for 1 year and 2 more years to go. So it's quite a big project. And we have tried to illustrate the different activities here by using these pictures. And as you can see here in the middle, the goal is to have improved and inclusive access to water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions. And then we have divided it into 2 different outcomes or sub-goals, where one is improved water supply systems, and then the other one is sanitation and hygiene. So if we look at the pictures to the left, the 2 top ones, this is intended to illustrate the sort of hardware component of the water outcome. And what we do here is that we use these sort of climate resilient solutions to bring groundwater up to the communities. So first, the ground is scanned for water availability, and then we drill. And then lastly, we use solar energy to pump up the water to the taps. And then in doing this, we're also setting up water committees. And I think Lili mentioned that previously, that the water committees are really important because they have the responsibility to sort of maintain the water systems and make sure that they're used properly, and to have that kind of coordination function. And this is very important, especially for the local anchoring a project and making sure that someone is responsible for it after the project ends in 2 years. And again, women play a really important role in these committees because they are often the ones who have to fetch water, but they're not always invited as decision makers. So what we do is that we invite and we allocate specific seats for women in these committees so that they're, able to take decisions and that they feel listened to in doing that. And then there's the sanitation and hygiene component. So on the right side to the top, we see our colleagues here demonstrating on how to put on a sanitary pad, and it's made during the International Menstruation Day, 28th of May. And since we know from the data and the context analysis that Lili presented previously, we know that girls are not allowed to access sanitary pads sometimes, and that there are many sort of attitudinal problems in the communities. This event is also bringing these attitudes to the forefront, and we speak openly about periods, taboos, stigmas, and sort of norms. And of course, there's also a handout of sanitary pads. And what happens is that the girls, they receive a kit with 3 different kinds of sanitary pads, one biodegradable one reusable one in fabric, and then a normal one, so that they can decide themselves which one they prefer. And in this sort of sanitation hygiene component, we also work a lot with engaging the communities in dialogue. So we invite both duty bearers like authorities, religious leaders, etc., health people, and school representatives, but also so that they can meet with the local community themselves. So women, youths, men and boys are all coming together. And here the floor is open for everyone to speak about norms and more delicate topics, so that they can speak their views and that we can challenge these existing norms and attitudes. And it's quite a powerful way of actually, making people's voices heard. So it's very important to work with the whole community and not only the women and girls. And Sunwash also works to empower youths and especially girls through so-called sanitation marketing groups. So basically what we do here is that we equip youth groups with the business skills and startup capital so that they can start their small businesses. The girl here in the middle is making sanitary pads. We're also offering liquid soap production, and we might also scale this up to other type of wash businesses, like constructing latrines or doing more engineering work for the water systems that I mentioned previously. But this depends a lot on what the youths and girls themselves want to do, and also what the market situation looks like. And then there is the issue of sanitation. And you heard previously that 98% of the population in this project area practice open defecation. So it's a deeply, deeply rooted habit. And it requires a lot of training on sanitation, a lot of education and capacity building in why it's harmful for our health, and how it can lead to disease transmission and so on. So we work a lot or our team work a lot on behavior change to prevent this. And once that is sort of started and established, and the next step is to support the communities to construct their own latrines using local materials like clay or leaves, etc. And we also do hardware for sanitation and hygiene, which can be using concrete to do latrines in schools, for example. So this is a big, complex project, as you can imagine, and it takes time to bring about the change that we're asking for. And sometimes it can feel like we're taking steps back rather than moving forward. But I also think that is the nature of working with WASH and behavior change. So it is challenging, but it's also very rewarding, especially when we hear feedback from the communities. So Lili, you will present a couple of quotes or examples of the changes that we have made. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, there are stories that came out from our intervention. As you can see in the picture, this is one of a beneficiary from our project. He actually has constructed a simple pit latrine supplied with a hand washing facility after he had our hygiene promotion services, particularly the community leader total sanitation, which is actually making the community triggered to have their own latrines. So he has constructed this latrine and he is using it regularly with his family. And he was saying that he has stopped using an open defecation as a means of sanitation. This is a very good example or success story that we got from our intervention. And another story from another beneficiary is something related to menstrual hygiene management. As we said it earlier, menstruation is a topic that is taboo, which is not discussed it at all in the community. There is this social norms attached to it. So this is one of the success stories that came up from one of the households that the girls are started to talk about menstruation freely with their families. They now have started to request their parents to buy them sanitary pad. As you can see, their dad was the one who bought this sanitary pad, which is actually it's an achievement for us. Yeah, so we hope that there will be some more stories as we work forward. We will get some more stories from our project. I will stop here and let Anna to continue to summarize what we have learned so far and propose kind of a call for action. Thank you, Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just quickly to summarize then. So me and Lili, we hope that this has shed some light on the importance of tackling WASH as a whole, and why it's actually harmful to sometimes forget about the sanitation and hygiene. If you bring about clean water, but you're not working to, to wash your hands, the water is at risk of being contaminated. So that will take a step back in that result. And we've also shown some examples from the Sunwash, where we bring these components together. We also think that this is relevant for this year's topic of bridging borders and sustainability. And one call for action, I don't know, it could be that maybe the event in August could be called World Wash Week. I don't know, maybe that's something that we could discuss later on. Yes, Lili.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. It's great to be part of this learning platform. And if you have any question and feedback, please let us know. We would be happy to hear from you. And below are, here are our contact details. You can reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we do have some questions already here in the chat. I start with the first one from Gaylina. How do we shift mindsets when it comes to gender bias in WASH?
Lili, do you want to give it a go?
Okay. So yeah, as we said it earlier, this WASH is very much related with gender, the aspect of gender. So in terms of access to WASH services, women are the ones who are affected the most. As we said it earlier, there are many gender norms or beliefs or cultures that hinder women from participating, taking part in WASH activities. That is the root cause of the root causes which hinders or which limits women from participating or dealing WASH issues. So when we look at the context or the assessment findings, this is something that needs to be worked out. So we have to deal with these cultural norms or beliefs that we should change this thinking of men and women in terms of having WASH tasks. So as we said it earlier, women are the ones who are very much involved in WASH activities, like we said, collection, maintenance, the cleanness of the households, but they are excluded from making decisions. So that will affect the sustainability of the WASH infrastructures. So if you are planning to achieve or a sustainable WASH service, we need to make sure that we are engaging different groups, not only women's, but different groups as per their needs to bring those, the required change.
Thank you. Thank you. And Alice has a question. Blood and human feces are often being considered sensitive content. No wonder they are blurred in visual reports and sometimes come with a content warning. In your opinion, how can we feature menstrual blood and feces and other SNH components in the media? That's a very interesting question.
Spontaneously, I'm just thinking, picture it for what it is. I mean, don't try to pretend that it's nothing that it isn't, because then you create more taboos and attitudes that are not really progressive. That's just from my spontaneous top of my head. Lili, what do you think?
Yeah, I think That's it. That's what I think. If you are doing the same thing, I think we are encouraging the same thing to be done. So we have to show them the problem as at the media.
And
So-
also, just to add on that, I mean, we have the International Menstruation Day, which is actually becoming quite a big thing. And at Plan, we're really celebrating that day, and we're doing big events, and we're having a lot of, you know, famous people coming as influencers and doing that to kind of make it a proud thing as well, and not only to make it a taboo. And yeah, there is also the World Toilet Day. So there are many, I think there is efforts to be made, but I think it's really good that we are also having this kind of opportunity to talk about it and to reinforce it.
And remind us again, World Menstruation Day, that is end of May sometimes, isn't it?
Yes, 28th of May.
28th of May.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. And World Toilet Day, do you have that on top of mind?
I think it's in October.
Right.
I don't have the exact date.
Okay,
I'm
so
afraid.
one in May and one in October that we can keep track of.
Yeah.
I want you to also make everyone aware and highlight that Lindsay has shared a link saying, I have been creating a resource to help those working in menstrual health communicate their work in relation to climate change. Maybe it could be of use to some people here. And there's a link in the chat about this, so please share that. We have time for some more questions. There has been a lot of criticism around, this is from Megna. There has been a lot of criticism around sanitary pads and their contribution towards plastic waste management. Traditionally, rural communities use cloth, which is more eco-friendly. Why are you not using the already available resources instead of going for pads?
Yeah.
Do you want to take it? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so actually what we did was we actually promote the reusable sanitary pad. We're using the commercial one during emergency, context. Like we were celebrating a menstrual hygiene day. So by then we are promoting, people to use the sanitary pads. That was actually not the case. It's not practiced. People's not at all use the sanitary pads. So that picture was to show you, like, to encourage people to use a sanitary pad. But as a project, as one of a project activity, we are promoting this girl is the one we said, the one we empowered, like the sanitation marketing group, to see, like, to make this reusable sanitary pad to address the needs of the community. That is part of our intervention. But at the same time, we also use these commercial products during events and campaigns to show them how to, use those sanitary pads or those kits properly. If you have any additional, maybe Anna can add it on that.
No, I think you captured it well. I just wanted to add that we're also exploring different types. So there is this biodegradable pad, which is not, it's slowly starting to come to the Ethiopian market. So we're actually exploring opportunities to for girls to use that. So that is also part of that handout, but it's still early stages. But I think the most common one that we're using is the fabric one, especially that's the one that the youth groups are making themselves.
Right, thank you. And Anna, you were mentioning that Water Mission is coming as the next speaker along in this program. And I would also like to remind everyone who's listening that then our third speaker of the day is Camily Pereira dos Santos from Brazil, who has been developing together with a colleague of her a sanitary eco-friendly pad by byproducts from Brazil, using raw materials from the agricultural industry. So hang on in this workshop of today, and we will learn more about eco-friendly pads also from Brazil. I also like to, if you haven't seen it, Magnus also posted a link in the chat, so please don't forget about that. And I have a question that I was quite interested to find out more about. You were saying that how to get women to participate in decision making when it comes to WASH related issues, and that you allocate special seats for them and to make sure that women have a say. But doing so, when allocating special seats and making sure that women must have a place in the discussions, what were the initial reactions from the communities, both from the women and from the men?
Yeah.
You want to?
Can you take that or?
No, you can take it.
Yeah, so now that this project has started a year ago, not actually, it's not a year now. It will end. This phase will end on September. So we now are at the early stage. So what we are doing is we bring these females to establish a water committee. We call it a water user association. Those are the ones who are expected to manage the water supply systems or the schemes. So in doing so, we select more females than males. So most of the members are the females, majority, and also men are also part of the water committee. So our plan is, we said that their participation is limited in this water-related decision making. Now that we want to change this scenario, that we bring these females in these water committees to have their saying, to have a power to make a decision regarding, the infrastructures. So maybe what we can do is we bring those women as a chairperson, in terms of governing the structure. So women will be the one who manage the infrastructure. So in this way, we can change, or we can bring some change in the community. In the discussions before establishing the committees, we collect, or we gather the communities to select those females or those members. So they are representatives from the committees. So communities are part of the selection process and the establishment process. So it's very transparent, and it's established based on the discussion we have with these communities. So yeah, that's how we bring females into the top of our project implementation. There is also this dialogues and discussions on the water supply system designs, whether it is very suitable or not for them. That way, maybe we can hear their voices. We can consider how these infrastructures could be designed. So in such a way, we can make them participate. We can have their voices be heard, so that the water schemes and the project is, sustainable.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are discussions going on in the chat in between our participants. Please chat along, as I can see no more questions for the speakers. And I would then like to thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to Water in Communications and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. I will now call upon our next speaker, Will Furlong, Senior Director, Africa Region for Water Mission.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. Very much appreciate the opportunity to give an overview on this topic of water provision management and conflict and crisis. From my perspective, that essentially focuses primarily on refugee and host community settings. Bear with me just a minute. I'm having some issues with my screen. So I'd like to get to that topic and some values, particularly in aspects that have been important to our work in different refugee settings. But first, I want to give a very brief introduction to Water Mission. So Water Mission is a Christian engineering nonprofit and with a significant emphasis on construction, engineering, and community development. We design, build, and implement wash solutions in developing countries and rural areas, refugee settings, and or disaster response. And our faith really drives us to serve all people, regardless of religion, nationality, any differences whatsoever. And our values are love, excellence, and integrity. And these inform and guide us in everything that we do. They really are part of how we go about things. We work all over the world, as shown on the map by the little orange circles, but the development work that we do is primarily focused in countries where we have country programs, and those are shaded in blue. In East Africa, we have programs in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Malawi. Our experience with refugees and host communities comes primarily from East Africa and the countries of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. We also have some experience with refugees in Malawi and through a partnership with Planned, some in Ethiopia as well. Refugee and host community areas where we are currently serving total about 1.2 million people in 3 major areas. In northern Uganda's West Nile region, we're currently performing operation and maintenance services, serving 418,000 refugees and host community members. In Kenya, in Turkana County, primarily around the Kakuma area, we're targeting about 556,000 refugees and host community members. And in Western Tanzania and Kigoma region, serving 2 refugee camps near Agusu and Ndutu with a total of about 200,000 refugees. The way refugees are handled is different in Tanzania than in Uganda and Kenya. In Uganda and Kenya, refugees and nationals live in integrated communities and share wash services. But in Tanzania, refugees are kept isolated in camps and completely separate from host communities in the region. And these different configurations between refugees and host communities result in somewhat different approaches and challenges in providing wash systems and services. However, there are some significant values that contribute to minimize conflict that both types have in common when working to address wash needs. At Water Mission, we have a deep regard for the sacred worth of people, whether they're refugees, host community members, whether they are in government, other aid organizations. It affects everything we do and how we do it. And I can give you an example. Starting in 2015, during the Burundi refugee crisis in Western Tanzania, there was a humanitarian emergency to provide aid to refugees and do it quickly. The Burundian people pictured here were a part of the reason. Masses of people gathering on the shore of Lake Tanganyika in Western Tanzania who needed food, water, shelter, security, and needed it very quickly. As a result of this tremendous need, and while we were working very quickly to serve that need, Tanzanians and host communities were watching trucks like these, and these trucks were carrying pipe for a system we were implementing in Nyarugusu refugee camp. These trucks were loaded with millions of dollars in aid, pouring into Nyarugusu to provide safe water, food, shelter, medical care, schools, while the Tanzanians themselves were watching this aid go by and were in need of the same kinds of services that the refugees were receiving in the camps. In many ways, the lives of the refugees had some advantages over the lives of people living in host communities. And so the Tanzania government brought this disparity to the attention of aid organizations, especially those who were involved in WASH, and asked that people in Tanzania communities hosted the refugees, that they who were hosting the refugees be considered for assistance also, particularly with safe water. So we discussed this situation internally, and after thinking about it, we agreed with them that it wasn't fair. So we decided to approach our partners and see if we could build interest in serving Tanzania communities. And one of them was the Grunfus Foundation. And this led to a host community safe water program to operate in parallel with the refugee work. And this has been the result. Partnership with the Grunfus Foundation and more recently UNICEF, and significant discussions with the government of Tanzania and communities in Western Tanzania and Kigoma region led to implementing sustainable safe water solutions in 27 communities and 5 hospitals, serving more than 190,000 Tanzanians in the region to date. Each blue dot that you see on this map represents a safe water solution that was implemented, and those blue dots are locations of a satellite-based remote monitoring system that monitors total daily water produced as well as other parameters if we decide to monitor them for every system that we implement. These systems serving the Tanzanian people have significantly helped to address the government's concern. And we don't hear much about that concern these days, maybe about specific communities, but not as a general state of events. Another significant value has to do with implementing solutions with excellence in accordance with engineering and construction standards. Implementing with excellence affects water quality, operation and maintenance costs, system reliability, sustainability, and reduces a significant cause of conflict with refugees and or host communities receiving the water. And in our experience, if the commitment to excellence is present at the beginning of planning, then the implementing a system with excellence does not significantly affect how long it takes to construct a solution. This is a simple example. The pipe on the left is a common sight in East Africa. Burying pipe in a shallow trench looks easier, but as crops are planted and people swing hose to plant maize or beans or whatever it might be, as trucks drive over the pipe, as animals walk over the pipe, eventually the pipe fails. It's not a question of if it's going to fail, it's a question of when it's going to fail. And when it fails, it leads to service interruptions, which lead to higher O&M costs and anger on the part of people who need the water, which is now interrupted. Burying pipe so shallow also encourages illegal connections and vandalism, especially if the pipeline passes through a host community area to serve refugees without considering the water needs of the host community. Contrast the pipe on the left with the one on the right. The pipe on the right meets our standards of at least 1 meter deep, which means that it's safe from farming activities, trucks, and livestock, which then minimizes O&M costs, maximizes sustainability, and the uptime of the system. It's more resistant to illegal connections and vandalism, and helps reduce potential conflict as a result. Another common value has to do with a commitment to be a good partner. This is realized through building consensus before the work starts, treating other organizations as you would want to be treated, and then having a sincere commitment to help them succeed whenever it's possible to do so. We found it very helpful in our communication and working with other organizations to hire a dedicated liaison officer to represent water mission at WASH cluster, head of agencies, host communities, and other meetings. And the result is that communication increases on both sides while operations move forward effectively. Been a tremendous assistance to us. The last value has to do with communication, and basically it's early and often, as from the beginning, to include conversation, communication with everyone who is involved, all levels of government, communities, other aid agencies, including UNHCR, WASH organizations, livelihood agencies that are involved, agencies involved in healthcare and schools. It's a crucial aspect to soliciting buy-in and building trust from the beginning, which leads to managing conflict by helping set expectations of everyone involved. In spite of some commonalities that are pretty much universal to managing and reducing conflict, there are some rather big differences between countries in the way governments consider refugees. In Tanzania, for example, the government isolates refugees in camps that are separate from host communities. Here is an example in Tanzania. This is Nyarugusu Refugee Camp, which is a pretty large camp, 136,000 plus people. And then less than about 2 or 3 kilometers away is the community of Mekere, which is pretty big, has 22,000 people. But even though Nyarugusu and Mekere are separated by just 2 or 3 kilometers, until last year, Mekere did not have safe water. While all of Nyarugusu had access to at least water for at least the last 20 years, and safe water since at least 2019. Sustainability in refugee camps in Tanzania is essentially guaranteed by UNHCR and their WASH partner, NRC. And we provide some specialized support to the camps in Western Tanzania. Water in the camps is free, and refugees collect water using 20-liter jerry cans at public taps spread throughout the camps. The expectations are very different in host communities. There is an expectation by communities and government that people will pay for water and the systems will be sustainable. There's also an emphasis, which is growing significantly, to provide household connections, which doesn't really exist in the camps. Conflict is avoided through early discussion with the government and communities to build consensus on the price of water that helps support sustainability. In Uganda and Kenya, governments have taken a very different approach. The refugees and host communities are integrated and share WASH services. Historically, water has been provided free to both. However, the long-range goal is that the integrated communities be self-sustaining and pay for water. This approach requires a significant focus on excellence, resulting in minimizing O&M costs, but also requires a focus on livelihoods to develop the economic base of the area to even begin to really pay for water. This is an example from Kakuma Refugee Camp and Kettle Bay Settlement in Turkana County of integrated WASH services providing free water to both refugees and host communities that are interspersed in the same area. Water pipelines in the drawing are depicted by red lines, and in some cases pass through host community areas to reach refugees. This can result in conflict and vandalism by host community members to provide water for livestock, for example, or other purposes, if their needs are not considered in the planning and construction of those pipelines. The government's plan for this region is to address social, economic, and environmental needs among refugees and local communities that will lead to sustainable WASH and other services on a lasting basis. This approach is very similar to one being implemented by the government of Uganda in the West Nile region of northern Uganda. In Kakuma, under a grant from Dunedin and a consortium led by Plan International and other partners, and through a separate grant from Grundfos Foundation. Water Mission is working to rehabilitate existing water supply to lower O&M costs, increase reliability, add to existing water supply, and provide water in support of livelihood, education, and healthcare activities. Addressing livelihoods, in essence, raises the economic base in the poorest county in Kenya, is crucial to helping people afford to pay for water and then contribute toward a sustainable, safe water system. Success requires working according to our values of love, excellence, and integrity, and significant communication with at all levels, UNHCR, other agencies providing wash and livelihood services in the area, and with our partners, especially Grundfos Foundation and Plan International. So just to summarize, what I've tried to describe are some key values that we have found fundamental to heading off conflict and building relationships with people that lead to the capacity to talk when conflict does happen, and leads to resolution. So I want to just summarize by closing the basic points, some of the values. Decide your basic values. Include, and would recommend very much including, a high regard for others. Don't compromise excellence for speed. It doesn't pay. Be a good partner, and I would recommend that you consider a liaison officer as a member of your team. Communicate early and often, and where possible, consider support for livelihood to increase the economic base. That will be a blessing to everyone involved, especially the community members. So I want to thank you for your time. Very much appreciated, and I hope you have a blessed day.
Will, we have a question for you here from Galina. How do you minimize conflict between the host community and refugees in accessing water, especially when there is water shortage? And then we have a second question, but we take this one first. Well, right there.
Yes. Well, consider them equally. And discuss if there's a limited amount of water, then look for additional sources of water, which is one of the things we're doing in Kikuma. We've had some friends from Aarhus University in Denmark they've done 3 groundwater studies in the region, looking for ideal places that might provide good quality water in good quantities. And so we're looking forward to the results of those studies. And one of the goals is that we add additional water supply while monitoring the impact on groundwater reserves. We'll monitor groundwater level and water quality to make sure that we don't deteriorate the capacity of the water source. So if additional water supply can be found, that's a terrific solution. Then there are ways to, particularly when you're talking about a location like Kikuma, where the main source of water is a wash, basically, which has seasonal water supply. So there are ways that you can increase or at least maximize groundwater recharge through managed aquifer recharge and other means. So that's one way, but there still has to be communication between the refugees and the host community members to get everybody on the same page and make sure that one group doesn't feel like they're being slided over the other.
Thank you for that. Galina also has a second part of her question. How do you control waterborne diseases, especially when the refugees are integrated with the host community?
We always treat and we always verify. So if the water, it depends on the water source. So if the water source is a groundwater borehole, usually the turbidity is going to be less than 5 NTU. So which means that if you disinfect with chloride, then you would kill the bacteria that is present in the water. And then throughout the system, as long as you can measure a minimum residual at the most remote tap in the system. If the water is contaminated with dissolved contaminants like fluoride or chloride, then what's being done by Peace Winds Japan in Kekuma is a good solution, where they're blending water from different water sources so that the resulting contaminant levels are within human health standards. So if the water source is a surface water source, then the water has to be filtered. There are organisms that are in surface water that are too large and resistant to just get rid of using chlorination alone. So what you have to do is filter them, and they come out easily in sand filters, and follow that by disinfection with chlorine to kill the bacteria.
Thank you. We have another question here from Jane. How do you maintain relations with the political and technical teams, especially in the local governments?
You start early, make sure they understand who you are. In our case, we have high standards, and so we talk to them about our standards and our procedures and make sure that they understand the reason why. And sometimes things can go south, and when they do, then you need to meet with them one-on-one and talk through it. I remember a situation in Western Tanzania where a governor, the district commissioner, who was representing a community where we were implementing a safe water system, had an issue with the way we were doing it. The issue was that it had nothing to do with the system itself. It had to do with the expectations of the people. And this was after we had explained all of the factors that were related to those expectations. Well, we met with him and walked him through why those procedures were the way that they are. And once he heard, then he understood, and he became a strong ally. Now that doesn't always happen, but the solution is always going to involve meeting. And in our case, we would just treat that person with respect, try to honor very much their position in the government, which generally carries, which you can see, I think. And most of the time, we're able to work through to get to a solution. Sometimes the political situation is changing pretty rapidly. Again, Western Tanzania with the Rural Water Authority, they were created in the Water Act of 2019 and are still really kind of evolving, working out procedures and different, how they perceive and how they're going to work with different agencies and groups. So it's subject to change, but it always involves meeting and talking.
I think those are two very good ways of trying to get to an agreement, meeting and talking. We should do more of that, bridging borders. Karen, we have one question from you, and I think that's going to be our last question. Thank you for the very substantive presentation. I appreciated your focus on O&M, which is a critical factor in the sustainability of investments. Can you explain a bit more, besides focusing on excellence in construction, how you work with local governments or other partners to address longer-term O&M needs who is responsible for these?
That's a great question and a complicated one. So the way that we have been doing is that we have operated under a community managed model, and we've done that since about 2011, when we developed a community managed model that met our needs internally. And that has worked with continued support from Water Mission. So anytime a community would run into an issue, then we would provide specialized support, and usually we do it at our cost regardless, but also at a discount. The communities were saving money. We were monitoring the amount they had in the bank account. But because there is a trend towards professionalized water services, private utility type organizations taking over water systems, and the engineering standards and construction standards, and even the length of time that it takes to implement or to respond to a particular problem in a system don't generally, sometimes we have questions about those and concerns. And so we're right now looking at developing a private water utility where we can serve in a contractual relationship with the government or county, as the case may be, or even if there is an existing water service provider, such as may exist in areas in Kenya, as a subcontract. So we're working out the details of that, but at least through that kind of arrangement, then we'd be able to ensure that engineering standards and construction standards, and even the way that we engage with the community through community development, that we would be able to maintain our standards and excellence in that system and community.
All right, thank you very much. We are now running out of time. Just a clarification there, we are clarifying that O&M stands for operations and maintenance. Thank you, Will. Thanks for all the questions in the chat. We are now moving along in the program, and I'm inviting the next speaker. I mentioned her before, a little bit earlier, a Stockholm Junior Water Prize alumni, Camily Pereira dos Santos, chemical engineer student at Stanford University. The floor is yours.
All right, so first of all, thank you so much for the organization for making this event possible. It's a pleasure for me to be here and be able to share my experience developing this project. My name is Camily Pereira, and together with my colleague Laura Drebs and our advisor Flavio Twardowski, we developed sanipads, affordable and eco-friendly sanitary pads made from industrial byproducts. With this project, we represented Brazil in the Stockholm Junior Water Prize 2022, and we were recognized with the Dipoma of Excellence. Now I'm going to talk about how everything started. The idea of developing this project came in a conversation with my mom when I discovered that she did not have access to sanitary pads when she was younger. And it was the first time that I heard about period poverty, a big problem that is faced by 500 million women around the world and affects 1 in 4 Brazilian girls who ends up missing 45 days in a school year. This motivated us to start researching this topic. So period poverty consists of the lack of access to basic hygiene products and information about menstrual care, causing thousands of women worldwide to use improvised materials, such as pieces of cloth, newspapers, plastic bags, and even breadcrumbs, affecting their physical and emotional health and their quality of life. Besides, during the time that we started developing this project in 2022 in Brazil, the President of the Republic disapproved the law for the distribution of sanitary pads to women in extreme poverty and to female adolescents who study in public institutions. This decision caused a lot of indignation since it would not only affected the advancement of public policies, but also it implies continuing to prevent more than 27 million Brazilian women from studying, working, and doing other daily activities. Besides, the problems surrounding the use of sanitary pads are not only limited to the social and economic perspectives, but it also extends to environmental ones. On average, a woman discards 10,000 sanitary pads during their lives, and the most common commercialized sanitary pads take around 500 years to decompose, since most of them are made of plastic. Although there are already some sustainable alternatives such as reusable collectors and cloth pads, they are not accessible to a large part of the population considering their cost. With all these points in mind, we started working on the development of sustainable sanitary pads that would be a cheaper alternative. To do so, in the beginning, I sent an email to teacher Flavia to help me develop the project, and Laura also joined the project later to contribute with her previous knowledge from her other research that she developed about biodegradable plastics. With all those motivations in mind, Sustain Pads was created. To do that, we divided our methodology in 3 stages. In the first stage, we developed absorbent materials to replace the conventional cotton. In the second stage, we developed biofilms to replace the conventional plastic. And finally, in the last stage, we developed our prototype using the upcycling concept. In the first stage, we looked for the best absorbent materials through agricultural byproducts in our region. To do this, we tested the fibers from the banana pseudostem, the Jussara açaí, and corn cobs and rice husks. To increase the water uptake capacity, we took off the lignin components with an alkaline treatment. And through the results, we discovered that rice husks and corn cobs didn't have a good capacity since they had plenty of lignin in their composition. So we took them off from our experiments. However, with the banana pseudostem and Jussara fibers, we were able to improve their capacity and make them look really similar to conventional cotton. So we used these materials in our final prototype. And here are the images of these 2 fibers that we used. In the second stage, to replace the plastic layers, we tested the cocoa mesocarp and nutraceutical residues to develop our biofilms. The nutraceutical residues showed our best results, so with this material, we obtained the top and the bottom layers of our product, since depending on the concentration of this material, it could be absorbent and also it could be waterproof. So considering that conventional plastics can take more than 100 years to decompose, we analyzed the decomposition capacity of our biofilms, and we found that in 16 days, 50% of the development biofilms was degraded. Finally, in the last stage, we develop our prototype through the upcycling concept, which consists of the transformation of residues into new materials in a sustainable way, being part of the circular economy. To do this, we used fabric scraps from seamstresses in our region and sewed them to wrap our refill. Our absorbent refill includes layers that you can see. So the top layer is made of our absorbent biofilm. The middle layer is made of our vegetable fibers that we transformed in a material similar to cotton. And the bottom layer is made of a waterproof biofilm. The final prototype was able to absorb 17% more than conventional pads. Moreover, our processing uses about 99% less water. And with $1, a woman could buy 250 of our sanitary pads. So our project helps save the unseen water. On one hand, it reduces the water footprint in the agricultural part of the pet supply chain, and on the other, it reduces the contamination of groundwater since most of the waste disposal that is made in our country is done in dump sites. Also, we contribute to the triple bottom line since we provided our sustainable pad that is a solution for our community's problems that cover not only the social and economic contexts, but also environmental ones. Therefore, our project contributes to 5 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals created by the United Nations. So during our project development, we were able to participate in many different science fairs in Brazil and also international ones. But the Stockholm Junior Water Prize was the most unexpected one. It is because that we heard of the prize through an old friend of our advisor, and he told her to join the prize with one of the projects she had been developing with students. However, at that time, we were not able to relate our project to the prize theme, since at that time we were more focused on the social and economic issues, so we were not paying so much attention to the environmental ones. And when we were searching about the kinds of projects that used to participate in this prize, most of them were really focused on water treatment, and all things like that. So our project did not only contributed to sustainability, but it had a broad theme. When it was like almost the deadline, my advisor's friend reminded her of the prize again. And at that time, we decided to register, but we did not have so many expectations. However, the unexpected happened, so we were invited to participate in the national stage of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize in Rio de Janeiro with other 4 projects. That news was really important for us, not only because of the recognition, but also because that it would be the first time after the pandemic that we would travel as a team to present our project in person and represent our institution. So in Rio de Janeiro, we discovered that we would be the project to represent Brazil in Sweden. And at that time, we started to really recognize the impact of the project in a sustainability way, mainly relate our project with water. So being able to represent our country in Sweden was really a great experience, not only because of the recognition, we were able to be awarded the Diploma of Excellence, but it was much more than that. The experience of being in a different country, knowing a different culture, and also being able to share and meet other students from all over the world was one of the most unique and enriching experiences that we have ever had. And it was also during the participation of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize that we understood the importance of having clear communication when we explained our project. The fact that there are a lot of people that don't know anything about the area that we are talking, or also there are people that are experts in the area who want to advance in the details, makes us need to adapt our presentation depending on the level of knowledge of our public. And it helps us a lot to present our project better and improve our communication. So also one important thing when it comes to communicating our project to other people is always highlighting our motivation, why we are doing this project and why is it important. We always look to keep the essence of our project when thinking about future plans too. And in addition, we realize the impact when we quote the difficulties and challenges that we face along the way. This makes our report or presentation more empathetic and humane. So certainly clarity, the presence of spirit and objectivity are keys to effective communication, and it has helping us a lot in our participation in science fairs, and mainly in the Stockholm Junior Water Prize. One instance that we apply these communication skills is when talking with companies. We also always emphasize that our main objective with this project is to make the product accessible to women facing period poverty. So after being awarded the recognition for our project in the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, and understanding its impact on our community, we filed the patent for our process and product so that we could protect all this knowledge that we have been developing. We have even been sought by national and international companies to put our production into practice, but it has never advanced for conversations. One of the factors that we believe to be a great difficulty in producing sustain pads on a large scale is the traditional belief of large companies that cotton, for example, is the best material, and the way pads are being produced right now is the best. So we understand that there will need to be a change in the industrial production to attend new and innovative technologies. However, the fact that the pad supply chain is already designed to produce in the traditional way, it makes it difficult to make innovative change in the systems, since it's more advantageous for the industry to just stay the same. In the sense, we want to emphasize that a solution, it can start with the replacement of a single material. It can start replacing just cotton, for example, and proceed to replace plastic and so on, because it is through small changes that we can make a big difference. So we need companies to believe in the potential of sustain pads and want to develop it to serve the vulnerable population. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to share our trajectory with you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Magna has written a question. I'd like to know, what do you think about the discussions around MHM on global water conferences? And MHM, Magna, am I right in saying menstruation and hygiene? Sorry, MHM to me is... Yes. So, Camille, what do you think about these discussions on global water conferences? Is it sufficiently covered?
Well, I believe that this is a good start when it comes to talking more about period poverty, because for a long time, this theme was taboo. And mainly in Brazil, at least before I started developing this project, I haven't heard anyone talking about period poverty in any conference that I have participated in from Brazilian institutions. So starting with talking about this kind of theme in different conferences, and mainly the MHM, is a really good start to provide solutions, because it's through these spaces of discussion, it's through spaces where we can share our opinions, we can discuss this important topic, that we can find really good solutions for this kind of problems.
Thank you. And we have another question here, Magna. Do you, also, you said you got to know about the Stockholm Junior Water Prize through a friend. I'd like to know if you have to suggest how can Stockholm Junior Water Prize improve its outreach? What will be your suggestion? This is a major hindrance when it comes to representation from South Asia at such global water conferences, that most of the time they don't even get to know about such opportunities to feature their work. So what do you suggest, Camille?
Well, this was really a problem that the Stockholm Junior Water Prize was facing in Brazil, and something that I also helped with was to talk about the prize in the science fairs that already happens in Brazil, because in the science fairs is the perfect space where you can find people, creative people, to provide good solutions for this problem. So I was always really engaged with science fairs in Brazil and this kind of scientific events, and it was the perfect time to talk about the prize. And it was because of this that a lot of people that I know registered for the prize, and some of them were selected. So it was really good to be able to divulgate, to talk about the prize in events like that.
Right, so maybe science fairs in South Asia would be a place where to speak more about the prize. Amma says, I think this is a great step to reduce environmental pollution caused by sanitary pads that accumulate in the environment in a year. Are you hoping to spread it around the world?
Yes, I would really love to spread it around the world, but we understand that we need to start small, so maybe to help a single community and then expand it even more so that we can really spread it around the world.
I'd like to know if you, Camily, or if any of the participants here has heard of similar projects that maybe you can link up with and share experiences from. So have you, first of all, Camille, have you heard of similar projects in any other country or any other continent?
Well, in Brazil, I've heard about some similar projects, but most of them they like also develop sanitary pads with other vegetable fibers from like natural plants here in Brazil. But most of them were also not applied into practice. They are just projects, you know, with all the knowledge in there. So, but projects that are really applied in Brazil right now, I haven't heard of it.
No, right.
Yeah.
And I like to echo the comment from Gabriella that the presentation definitely shows how communication strategies helps to understand and highlight the project during just 15 minutes. So well done on your presentation. Jane would like to know, do you have explicit menstrual health management policies in Brazil?
Well, this is a topic that it has been discussed in our with our politicians just really recently. So, with the disapproval of the law to provide the sanitary pads in 2021, this topic in Brazil received a lot of visualization. So a lot of people started talking about that, started ask politicians to develop new policies for this topic. So right now, there are a lot of schools in Brazil that provide free sanitary pads for women in vulnerable situations, and also some hospitals too.
Right, thank you. Marissa says that we are about to release an educational TV program aimed at students in Mexico talking about this particular project. So maybe the two of you should link up.
That's so cool. Yes, I would like to know more about it.
I'm sure that we can arrange a link between the two of you. If we have no more questions from the participants, I'd like to thank you again, Camille, for being part of the project, Water and Communications, and good luck with your project and all the best for the future. I'll link you up with Marissa. And it's now time for me to introduce the last speaker of the day, Magnus Hieronymus, research leader for ocean climate and at the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute. So we are leaving wash and clean water, as you could understand from Magnus title, and we are moving out into the oceans.
The aim of this presentation is to talk about ocean warming and some of its effects. And I will focus mainly on marine heat waves and sea level rise. And marine heat waves are just an analogy to heat waves on land. So what we're talking about is prolonged periods of high temperature in the ocean. I think really any start of any discussion on ocean heat uptake and ocean warming should start with the planetary energy budget, because it's really fundamental to climate. It works somewhat like this. Everything that of interest that happens in the climate system is driven by solar radiation. So that's where the energy in the system comes in. It comes from the sun. And then the Earth loses energy to space through thermal radiation. And those are those more diffusive arrows going out here. And to have a stable climate, the amount of energy that comes from the sun and that radiates out from Earth should be equal. Otherwise, if the incoming radiation is bigger, then the planet accumulates heat and it becomes warmer, and the opposite occurs if the outgoing radiation is larger, or the energy in the outgoing radiation. And what is climate change then? Climate change perturbs the outgoing radiation. So when we release greenhouse gases and we release aerosols and we change land use and stuff like that, what we do is we perturb the outgoing radiation. So it's harder for radiation to escape to space. And that means that as it is now, more energy radiates in to Earth than radiates out. And this means that there is a net energy buildup in the system. And I can talk about energy and heat here basically interchangeable. And the effect of this energy surplus or the excess energy, that is that things becomes warmer. And what you see here is the percentage, where does this heat end up? And the vast majority of all this excess heat, it ends up in the ocean, around 93%. 3.5% goes into warming the land, 2.8% to melting ice, and then only around 0.7% warms the atmosphere. Why is that then? Well, it's mainly two things. So the ocean has a much higher heat capacity than the atmosphere, and that you need more energy to warm the ocean by 1 degree or water by 1 degree than you need air. So that's one thing. And also the mass of the ocean, there's much more mass in the ocean than in the atmosphere. So you can accumulate enormous amounts of heat in the ocean without changing the temperature so much, which you can't do in the atmosphere. This also means that ocean heat uptake or ocean heat content is a really good tell for basically climate change. So what we have here on top is a time series showing the global mean surface temperature. It goes back to 1860, and we have one for ocean heat content in the upper 700 meters of the ocean. In both of these figures, I should say also that the ocean heat time series here is much shorter because we haven't had measurements in the ocean for nearly as long as we have had on the land surface. And there are a number of lines in this graph, and they are different reconstructions, but you can see that they all show basically the same. That both the heat on the surface, so basically the global mean surface temperature goes up, especially after 1960. And the same is true in the ocean. But it's actually a better indicator if you look at the ocean heat content, because there is much less of this variability going on. So in the ocean, like in the atmosphere, you have weather, but it's less pronounced in this graph than in this one. So like in 1997 and 1998, we had a very big El Nino, which corresponds to this peak. And it took rather a lot of years, 10 or so, until you had a new peak in global mean surface temperature. But of course, you had climate change throughout all this period. But it's harder to find instances of that in the ocean heat content graph, because it's basically a more robust indicator of climate change than global mean surface temperature is. And this, of course, has implications for the ocean. And one of them is that stratification in the ocean changes. So the ocean almost everywhere is stratified. And it's stratified in density in such a way that the densest water is on the bottom and the least dense water is on the top. And density of ocean water is controlled by how warm it is, and also salinity, but mostly it's temperature. And the warmest water is on top because it has the smallest density, and the coldest water is on the bottom because it has the highest density. And this arrangement of the water parcels is controlled by gravity. So that means that you always have a stratification. If you look at a plot of depth versus temperature, you see clearly that it increases as you go upward in the water column. And this is what we call a stratification. And stratification, it inhibits mixing or transport of properties in the ocean. So then you get somewhat of a layered structure to your global ocean. So in the top, you have a layer where you have warm water and you have a lot of oxygen. And that's where the majority of all the marine animals live, and that's where you have primary production and exchange with the atmosphere and all that. And below that, you have a sort of strong stratification where ocean mixing is somewhat inhibited by this stratification, so you have less oxygen. You also have remineralization in the subsurface, so that's when organic matter falls down, it becomes eaten by bacteria and so on, and it uses oxygen. So you get oxygen minimum zones. And when you warm the ocean from the top, like you do currently, it's the atmosphere warms first and the ocean absorbs the heat. Then you get more stratification and you inhibit more mixing. So you get more and more of these oxygen minimum zones. So they expand. So you get an oxygen problem in the ocean from warming. And that's one of the sort of things I wanted to talk about. The other one is ocean or marine heat waves. And you can think of it like this. The lines I show here is called the probability density function. And I have one here in gray showing the current climate. And then you might think, what is a probability density function? Well, imagine that you go out and you measure temperature every day for tens of years. And you take all these measurements and you have a number of boxes that you arrange according to temperature. So you put a note in every day in the box that has the temperature closest to your observation. And then you count the number of notes you have in each box, and that is what you plot on your y-axis here. So that's the number of times this occurred, basically. And the other one is temperature. So the peak, the highest peak in this distribution is the most common temperature. And what happens then with climate change is that we shift this distribution to the right. And as you can see here on the tails of the distribution, that's where you have your extremes. That's where you have your very cold weather. It doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it can be a problem. And you have your very warm weather, your heat waves or marine heat waves in this example. And what you can see very clearly is that when you shift this distribution to the right, then these things that were very improbable to happen before, so there were almost no observations, so there were in fact no observations in the earlier period before your current climate, they will become much more common in the future climate. So the risk of seeing very hot condition increases and the risk of seeing very cold condition decreases with climate change. And this is quite visible. This is a map of marine heat waves that has occurred in the last almost 30 years. And we can see that basically all parts of the global ocean has had marine heat waves. Some of them extreme and some of them more moderate, but they occur everywhere. And of course, they would occur even without climate change, but they occur much more, and they are stronger now because we have a climate change. And of course, this has implications, not just to marine life, but sometimes also to us. So here are some examples. One famous heat wave was called the blob. You had 2.5 degrees warmer than average. It's the longest heat wave on record for 226 days. And it caused a lot of unusual warm weather in the Pacific Northwest of USA and Canada. And there's also been problems for fisheries in 2012 in the Northwest Atlantic. You had 2.5 degrees warmer than average for 56 days. And that led to problems for lobster fishing, for example. We also seen mass mortality of marine life in rocky reefs in the Mediterranean when they had 4 degrees warmer than average for 30 days. So a lot of implications, and not really just for marine life, even though that's probably the main cause of concern, but also for us by way of fisheries and food supply and things like that. The second implication of this that I meant to talk about was sea level rise. So sea level rises, and there's two preliminary causes for this, and both of them has to do with rising temperatures. And the first one, and so far the largest rise that has occurred historically, is thermal expansion, and that is just to do with ocean heat uptake that I discussed earlier. 93% of excess heat ends up in the ocean. When you warm ocean water, comes back to the stratification talk, then the density of that lessens. So you have for a fixed mass, you have a larger volume. So that means that the whole ocean expands and the sea level rises. The other predominant cause for sea level rise is that you add mass to the ocean. And that is done by melting ice that is currently on land. And then you have 3 quite large reservoirs. That's mountain glaciers and the ice sheets on Greenland and Antarctica. And the reservoir that has contributed most of these so far is mountain glaciers. But the reservoir as such is quite small. If you melted all the mountain glaciers on Earth, you would raise the mean sea level of the global ocean by about 0.3 of a meter. A much larger reservoir you have on Greenland, where you have about 7 meters of sea level equivalents if you were to melt all of it. But it also melts slower than the mountain glaciers. It's colder around Greenland and it's somewhat harder to melt it. And by far the largest one is the Antarctic ice sheet, where you have about 58 meters of sea level equivalents that could potentially melt if you melted all of it. And today we have a good, or I would say even a very good view of not only how much the sea has risen in the last 100 or so years, but also how these different components have contributed to it. So the globally average rise since about 1900 is about 20 centimeters. Roughly half of it is thermal expansions, and roughly 40% of it is from glaciers and ice sheet. And the remainder is from smaller processes. The largest of these is changes in land water storage. That's the orange bar or the orange line on the graph beside. And that is when we change, for example, when we pump out groundwater and when we build dams on land, then we change how much water is stored on land and in the ocean. And that, of course, has an effect on sea level rise. And you can also see, going back to the stratification, here I have 3 bars saying ocean and it's different depth levels. So the upper one here that has expanded the most is the upper 700 meters, then it's 700 to 2000 meters, and then it's more than 2000 meters. So the majority of the water in the ocean is in this small, larger than 2,000 meters depth, but it has expanded much less than the other ones because it takes time. The ocean is compared to the atmosphere, at least a very slow system. So it takes up heat a lot, but it's also capable of taking up a lot of heat, and redistributing it all the way down to the bottom takes a long time. So this process of sea level rise will go on for centuries and maybe even millennia. We also seen an acceleration in sea level rise, at least since the 60s. So if you look at different periods, between 71 and 2018, the average rise was about 2.3 millimeters per year. But if you look at more recent periods, like 2006 to 2018, it was 3.7 millimeters per year. And we also know that very well that at least since 71, this signal is dominated by anthropogenic climate change. Sea level rise is also highly, I would say, spatially inhomogeneous, meaning that the sea level does not rise the same everywhere. So far, I have talked about averages over the global ocean of sea level rise, but it's very different in different places. And one of the processes that are most spatially inhomogeneous of all these is the melting of ice on land. And this is what this figure is meant to illustrate. On your left here, you have an ice sheet, and you have a dashed line that indicates melt from this ice sheet. So when this ice melts, it becomes water and it runs out, and you see that sea level goes up. But something else also happens, because this ice sheet they have an enormous mass. And this mass, through gravity, attracts the sea level. So it pulls the sea towards it. But this attraction also lessens when the mass lessens. So this attraction becomes smaller. So what actually happens is that in proximity of the ice sheet, the sea level falls, and then it raises even a little bit more in the far field. So then there's a final process that is very prevalent in Scandinavia and some other parts that's been under ice, and that is post-glacial land rise. So again, you had an enormous amount of mass in the ice sheet, and you lessen that a little bit, then the pressure on the earth going down here becomes lessened. So the earth rises, and you have a flow of mantle mass inside the earth going here from here. And again, you redistribute sea level through this. So even more of sea level fall in the vicinity of the ice sheet, and a little bit more sea level rise in the far field. And you can see basically how this looks on a map. Here I have such a melting pattern, one for Greenland on the left and one for West Antarctica on the right. And the blue colors here, they indicate if you have a melt point on Greenland, the blue colors is where the sea level fall, and the dark red is where it rises the most. So you can see if you melt on Greenland, for example, you have a sea level fall close to Greenland. Here where we are in Scandinavia, you have quite a small response. And if you're in the South Atlantic, you have a very large response because you're far from it. And then you have a kind of mirrored opposite response from West Antarctica here, where the sea level falls around Antarctica if you melt there, and it rises a lot in the North Pacific and North Atlantic. And these differences are, of course, reflected in our projections of sea level for the future. So here we have a number of different projections for the year 2100 for different scenarios. The scenarios are called SSPs, that's shared socioeconomic pathway. So there are different stories about development, economics, population growth, land use, and related measures. And then there's a dash and a number, and the number is the radiative forcing, which determines basically how warm it will get. So a low radiative forcing means low warming, and a high radiative forcing, the highest here is 8.5, means a very high warming. And you can see that all of these, you have areas that are more affected and areas that are less affected. particularly it's easiest to see in the highest warming scenarios that you get a great deal of sea level rise along the US East Coast, for example, and much less in the high Arctic, even fall in some areas around Greenland, and the same in the Antarctic. So even though we typically quantify sea level as a mean sea level change for all of the ocean, it's really, there's very big differences regionally and even locally. And why do we care about it? To a large degree, it has to do with flooding, because when the mean sea level rises, the risk of flooding increases. So this is a direct analogy to the heat waves and the distributions I showed you before. So this is another sketch. So this is the recent past to our left. And if you want to build a house somewhere close to the sea in most countries, you do some statistics for sea levels. So you calculate, okay, what's the sea level I typically see once a month, once a year, once a decade, once a century, and then you place your house high enough that you should be very unlucky for it to get flooded. But these frequencies, of course, they change when the mean sea level rise. So that's what illustrated to the right. So with mean sea level rise, in this case, your 1 century sea level would occur every year. And that's quite common, in especially in the tropics. You have a very large change of frequency with sea level rise. So sea levels that are very uncommon today, you will see very often in large parts of the globe, even independent of which of these climate scenarios our future will follow. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Please feel free to just write your questions in the chat in Spanish or in English. We will do the translation either way. I was thinking, I mean, when we are talking about climate change, we also often talk about adaptation and how we're going to adapt our lives to climate change. What about adapting to ocean heat waves and ocean warmings? Must we move away from all the coastal areas? Will the islands be inhibited? What do you see ahead?
I think there will be a portfolio of different responses. I mean, there's not one that fits all. And I mean, all of these measures are unfortunate, but I mean, we already see seawalls being built. We also see artificial reefs and stuff like that as a response. But there's also retreat, of course. Some areas will just not be suitable for housing in the future. I think for the marine heat waves, adaptation is much more difficult because it's not predominantly us that are affected. It's marine species, and they don't really have a portfolio of adaptation measures. They tend to migrate if they can, or otherwise they die.
Right. Thank you. Peter says, hi, I'm a bit unfamiliar with SSPs. What kind of metrics are considered for those, especially on the socioeconomic aspect?
It's kind of, it's like a storyline, but it's not a very detailed one. But we need them to run these large climate models that form the basis for these projections. Basically, what you need is you need some forcing, and that forcing is greenhouse gas emissions, and it's aerosols, and it's changes in land use. The rest is kind of determined by the model. So you make up different futures, and you use these storylines. So this SSP1, for example, is a sustainable future, and SSP5, the worst one, is a fossil fuel based sort of development future. So then you then you make a trajectory for emissions that is somewhat linked to this for the different SSPs, and then you run your models with these trajectories.
Right, thank you. Peter, is that, let us know in the chat if you need any more clarification or something more developed in that answer. In the meantime, we say hello to Mayrav. This is very important. This is very interesting. Is there a way to communicate the importance of ocean health in a way that enables people to feel like they can take action? I'm afraid that the public can, quote, shut down, unquote, when presented with the alarming science. Do you have any communication suggestions or tips for us?
I don't know if I'm if I'm a specialist in that, but I actually kind of think that people tend to care about I think the ocean attracts a lot of attention when I speak about the ocean and ocean health, and if people tend to get concerned, and I think people feel that it is important, but I don't really have a top tip.
How do you communicate it at your agency?
Oh, we do all sorts. I mean, I'm at the research department, so I'm basically a researcher. I publish work that I go to conferences and write articles and stuff like that. But since we're also a government weather agency, we also do a lot of intergovernmental work, and I work with coastal municipalities and help them being kind of a physical climate backbone in their planning, and we do lots of things.
So I have one question. I mean, I normally work a lot in Southern Africa, where we've seen recurring and very strong cyclones that seems to come more often and seems to be stronger than what they used to be. Is that also part of the ocean warming, or is that climate change, or is it a combination?
The intensification of cyclones is, to a large, it has a lot to do with the ocean heat story, because the energy that drives these weather patterns, it comes from ocean heat. You don't really have cyclones in areas that are cold, so you will have an intensification of tropical cyclones in the future, and you've probably already seen like you said, an intensification, but that's something that will be even worse in the future.
Right. Marissa says, whoops, now it was lost to me. A gentle reminder for attendees and panelists to continue sharing their experiences in the group in Water and Communications. We have the LinkedIn group. Yes, please go on and share and see if we have more questions. There is someone who has also shared a link for compelling reports using images and storytelling techniques on rising water levels. Ali's for everyone on the program has posted a link. Don't forget that in the chat. We also have next week more about storytelling, and I think we can learn more about more storytelling tools for how to communicate, and maybe the communications about also ocean heats and ocean warming should be up on us a bit. I would like to thank Magnus very much for being on the program. Thanks for talking about ocean warmings. It's very important and part of the climate issues. And to all of you listening in today, thanks for your participation. Thanks for being active in the chat with links, with suggestions. Sign up to the LinkedIn group that Marissa has posted, and we continue the conversation there. On Thursday, it's midsummer in Sweden, and it's basically a public holiday, and there will be no workshop. So that's why we meet next time on Tuesday, June 25. And that's another interactive session. We are then going to get some help from Make Water Famous, who is going to talk about helping water rise to the top of the news agenda. And we will have a full session of Make Water Famous. I would now like to thank Cecile. I would like to thank the interpreters, all the speakers, the Grundfos Foundation, and I will see you all next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.